Let's bring up our distinguished guests. First, His Excellency Khalid Falih, the Minister of Investment. Let's give him a nice welcome. His Excellency Bandar Alkhorayef, who's the Minister of Industry and Mineral Resources. You're right here, Your Excellency. And where do we seat His Excellency Faisal Alibrahim, who's the Minister of Economy and Planning here at the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Robert Wilt's the Chief Executive Officer of Ma'aden, the mining group. Bob, you're right next to me here. And Øyvind Eriksen's joined us from Aker ASA from Norway. It's good to see him. And because we only have 45 minutes left, I can't mention all the titles for my Greek partner, Andrew Liveris, who's the former CEO of Dow Chemical, chairman of Lucid, sits on a number of boards of strategic industries here, and also decided in retirement, semi-retirement, to take on the Olympic Committee in Australia. Very small job. Gentlemen, please sit down. This is going to be all question and answer, and I appreciate the work of the Ministry of Investment and the instructions of His Excellency Khalid Falih to make sure this is super focused. I think it's quite prescient, and Minister Falih, you brought it up during our discussion yesterday, that you have to think out of the box because of the massive disruption that's taking place. There was the industrial strategy, which was ambitious alone in terms of the targets for manufacturing, the made in Saudi that you and I have talked about in the past, to do it here in Saudi Arabia. But this is another layer. It's to provide protection, but also opportunity, does it not? To say, we straddle east and west, we're a conduit for north and south. How do you put that into action quickly, because we learned quite a painful lesson during the pandemic? Do you want to take it from there?
Yes, well, thank you very much, John, and welcome, everyone. It's good to see so much interest, standing room only, and rightly so. This is, as you mentioned, a very topical issue and a very critical issue. We've seen it evolve over the last few years, actually, much pre-pandemic, where concentration of global supply chain was evident, and as I mentioned yesterday, we had taken the just-in-time concept and the efficiency of global integrated manufacturing, I think, to an extreme to where we were very, very vulnerable across various value chain. And also there was over-concentration in some geographies of certain components of global value chains that was bringing a lot of multinational companies and global industrialists to be concerned. You couple this with new value chains that were developing. So electrification in general, as less fossil fuels and more renewables go into industry, into people's homes, into commercial applications. And new value chains being developed where there was no capacity at all or hardly any capacity. So all of this was requiring massive investments. And they needed to be the right investments also from a climate and sustainability standpoint. And that's where this global supply chain resilience program. I just want to, at the outset, make sure everybody understands this is complementary of our local content initiative, led by no less than His Excellency Bandar Alkhorayef, our Minister of Industry, and of course, developing local supply chains to support our local industries and our local demand and to provide the internal resilience of our economy. And our industrial policy, which we are open about, proud about, is complementary to what we're doing. What we're doing with this initiative is for Saudi companies and international companies who want to provide the solutions to the challenges I just mentioned that have brought disruptions to many manufacturing. I think Andrew and Øyvind will talk about their experiences and their companies globally about the vulnerability they have. So we want to be part of that solution. We want to provide the materials which are available here. We want to leverage our competitive energy, second to none by far, whether it's conventional energy, fossil fuels, of course, electricity, renewables, hydrogen, strong infrastructure. His Excellency Minister Alkhorayef will talk about a fantastic infrastructure that he inherited when he assumed the job, which I helped develop for him, the
Was that a blessing or a curse? It gave you two different
but I have to
major
say,
pillars.
But I have to give him credit. He has pumped it up and took it to the next level, and he has been able to also get a lot of allocation that is going to take what is already one of the world's best infrastructure to the next level. And integrated with it we think, is one of the most competitive digital infrastructure, knowing that fourth industrial revolution is here and is going to take our industrial. He'll talk about it, I'm sure, within. So all of this makes the kingdom the place to go, the place to come. If you're not here, the place to build. And of course, Bob will talk about what our mineral industry is doing in addition to the licensing that is going on from the various programs under the mining arm of the Ministry of Industry and Mining. So we believe we have an unbeatable combination of enablers and competitive advantage, not to mention what we're spending today on IP and RDI in terms of our research, development, and innovation, and the fantastic talent, and also the open labor policy. Many of Western countries have restrictions on accessing global talent. In Saudi Arabia, it's open and it's going to get more open. We have special economic zones that will be launched in due course. It is part of the NIDLIB strategy, which His Excellency chairs. So we believe we tick all of the boxes and then some. And this initiative is just to bring it all together, to present it in an integrated way to our national champions and international investors.
Great, it's a very good architecture for our discussion. So let's bring in Minister Alkhorayef. You have kind of two mandates right now. One is to get this as a manufacturing base, much more pervasive beyond energy itself. And then I had a chance to meet with Bob yesterday about the mineral resources development and even the Future Minerals Forum to make this well known that it's going to be a mining hub. But how do you build resilience into a system that you're moving quickly to develop at the same time? That's the art here, right? To make it regional and local. Can you deliver for both of those, for both the manufacturing and the mining sector, to have that resilience, Minister?
Thank you for the question. I think if we look at the last 3 years, we have probably heard the word resilience more than we have heard it since in the last 20 years. So it's really the buzzword of what we are trying to do altogether. I mean, the industrial strategy today is a combination of ambitions of the government, of the country, to grow the industrial sector to reach 900 billion riyals of GDP. That's almost 3 times the existing GDP contribution. Our exports would grow by double by 2030, even by almost 4 times in 2035. We are attracting investments of around 1 trillion riyal by 2030, or almost 2 trillion riyal by 2035. We have lined up more than 800 different projects that are essential to enhance the resilience, the situating the Saudi Arabia to be really a hub for the global community, part of the supply chain. So that's on the side of the ambitions, but also it's all about the quality of the strategy and how it's well thought to connect mining with downstream, with different industries. I mean, the success we have made in mining in aluminum, for example. Today, we process all of the aluminum that we get from our mines to finished products, really high-end products that are used in food processing or on automotive and hopefully in aerospace in the future. So this is the kind of contribution that we're doing when it comes to resilient. In petrochemical, the plan in the strategy is really to go downstream. We are enabling the petrochemical investors, especially those who come with downstream products. We have also lined up different products that we feel that we can add value, we can create added value within the country. And so from these two angles where we are actually capturing value from our natural resources, add to that our geographical location, which is really perfect when it comes to access to different markets, Africa, Asia, definitely the Middle East. We have a great home market, regional market. So if you put all of this together, and as His Excellency rightly said now, this initiative is actually complementing what we're doing. What we are hoping also to see the economic zones and free zones also becoming as part of the enablers. So that's, I mean, the strategy of Saudi Arabia in industry is nothing to do only with local market. It is for global presence. And definitely what we have seen in the last 2 years allow us to really design a strategy that caters for our nation, providing quality jobs, getting the best use out of our resources, our geographical location, but also being part of the global community in supplying different goods and services, in strengthening the supply chain.
Great. Okay, we'll circle back with a couple of other things that you brought up there, and I think Bob will address it in terms of the mining sector. But let's bring in, I don't want to be cheeky, but I was going to say the king of data, because you're building these businesses and investment. He has to see how it feeds into the 2030 agenda. Your Excellency Faisal Ibrahim, we had a chance to meet 3 weeks ago, and you said we're going to have a data bank that we're monitoring how this actually help achieve the goals of the 2030 program itself. Does it help accelerate the job creation, for example? Then there's the other challenge of having the talent ready to take advantage of all the growth on the ground. How do you see it from your standpoint at the ministry?
Sure, thank you, John. I think I'll start first with our, overarching long-term economic challenge. We need to diversify our sources of growth. We're seeing that today. Basically, we need to decouple from a single commodity price, decouple the economic activity from single commodity price, which is oil. We're seeing non-oil activities growing. The last quarter two, we've seen it at 8.2. If you remove 8.2%, if you remove the net tax effect, it'll be 6.1, higher than in the last 11 years. Still below our internal targets, but it's still good news. Public finance, which fuels part of the economy, is becoming a little more detached from oil price as we establish fiscal rules and we adhere to them. The Sovereign Wealth Fund, PIF, and its activities and NDF are becoming more independent of how much of the money they get from the government. And the private sector's contribution to GDP is increasing. We started off in the low 40s, now in the high 40s, depending on what methodology, even in the low 50s. So what we're seeing, what we need to achieve is more, as His Excellency said, a more diversified non-oil export base that is more complex. This opportunity, this initiative comes in a timely place, and it's a very smart move in terms of helping us achieve NIDLIP's objectives, but also helping attract the attention of the global community, especially as in the last 3 years, resilience is a question. Now, globalization is not decreasing, it's still rising. It's 7.7 trillion at the end of Q1, if I'm not mistaken. But inter-regional trade is improving. For example, in Asia and ASEAN, inter-ASEAN, it's, I think, one of the highest ever. So this creates an opportunity for us to bring the compelling enablers that Their Excellencies mentioned, the location, the Vision 2030's impact in terms of policy predictability and institutional environment, the access to talent, I would add to that, in a place and a time where talent is scarce. And on that note, and in relation to your question, we've established we've invested in infrastructure and public goods in the past decades, but recently, since the start of Vision 2030, we've even doubled down on what we want human capital development outcomes to be or to reach. We have a very young population, 60% below the age of 30, 41% below the age of 25, between stage 2 and 3 of the demographic dividend, meaning if we don't invest in them today, we will have a wasted opportunity as the society ages. We have, on top of that, access to energy, not only leadership in traditional hydrocarbon energy, but renewables and clean energy. That's where the kingdom is heading as well. It wants to establish leadership there. But we also, as His Excellency mentioned, in a world where sustainability is becoming more important and becoming a factor of decision-making for a lot of firms and countries, we're becoming leaders, or we plan to become leaders in carbon management, carbon removal, carbon capture, utilization, sequestration. All of these together create the right economics for global players, global investors to think of the kingdom more seriously. And you can bet on the kingdom as an economic environment, because we believe it will continue to be a reliable place to do business, but also on the government and how it interacts with the private sector and large investors, because this is a national economic need, and we need it to succeed for us to achieve our objectives.
Excellent. Okay, very good. Robert, do you want to come in on, this is fairly new for you, because it's just about a year into the job, right, at Ma'aden, and how important the mining sector is to future growth. I mean, a lot of things I mentioned in my opening comments, most people don't recognize you need mining for an energy transition. Right. We're over-dependent on China for the refining process, has a lot of assets in Africa. What would you say the kingdom brings to the party here in terms of global diversification of mining supplies and the capabilities of delivering it?
I mean, so the kingdom's already got an established track record of being a mining champion. I mean, we are the world's third largest exporter of phosphate fertilizers. We've already got the lowest cost integrated aluminum value chain, as is excellency mentioned. So we've got the demonstrated capability in the kingdom to do it. The next question is, what else is out there? The kingdom's fairly underexplored in terms of minerals. Now, on the Arabian Shield, we know there's gold. We've got 6 gold mines. We know there's some copper. So there's a potential for huge copper finds. The platform, vastly underexplored. And I was interviewed today by a news agency and they asked, is this $1.3 trillion worth of mineral resources in the kingdom hype, or is it real? Since that interview, I've had 2 international major mining CEOs talk to me this morning wanting to partner and come here. I've had one call me on the phone. So I don't know if it's hype, I don't think it is, but the smartest people in the world want to help make Saudi Arabia the most explored geographical jurisdiction globally to find out what the potential is, because it's the center of the world, the talent's there, we think the resources are there. I think this is the place to be for metals and mining right now.
Okay, just a very quick follow-up, if I may, is that there's also that permitting process, and this came up at the Future Minerals Forum yesterday, is like if you try to do this in Canada or the United States, you're looking at a 10 to 15-year process, right? If you decide you have the brain trust and you want to fire and shoot and make it happen, it's a very different conversation, is it not?
Yeah, I don't know, I'm not going to compare it to other jurisdictions, but we work in conjunction with all the ministerial agencies to make this happen, because we've got strategic vision. We're all focused on the same thing. So there's cooperation, there's alignment of incentives. It's a phenomenal place to work and be. As you mentioned, less than a year in the role, and the speed at which we're operating, government and business together, is amazing. Okay,
very good. Øyvind Eriksen from Norway, I know you've had the partnership with Aker, of course, collaborating during the time of His Excellency at Saudi Aramco, then at the Ministry of Energy. But I think you could serve as a perfect case study of taking that oil and gas expertise that you took into services and then took into technology for the journey of the kingdom itself, right? Where can you provide support, for example, in Saudi Arabia as a company that's made its own transition and brings technology to the fore to make diversification happen at a faster pace?
Sure. Aker is a result of a rather successful oil and gas policy in Norway. When Norway 50 years ago discovered oil and gas without any oil and gas capabilities whatsoever. So what they did was to partner with global champions and to invite international leading firms to invest and basically help them to build up also a supply chain domestically and be a part of the global supply chain. And I see very clear parallels to the opportunities here in the kingdom as we speak. So Aker has built new industrial capabilities at the shoulders of existing businesses. And in recent years, we have also built up a software business, which has the capabilities you need in order to run the supply chains more efficiently. It's here in Saudi Arabia, we have established a joint venture with Aramco called Context to provide companies and ministries in this region with the technology they need in order to operate more efficiently, in order to execute some of the largest capital-intensive projects in the world. So enhanced efficiency in the supply chain, make sourcing more predictable, and basically work on the same digital platform is part of the solution. And the Context here in Saudi Arabia has the capability to be a provider not only domestically, but also a global champion.
So it just makes efficiency faster, is what you're saying, with that sort of...
Helped by digital tools and new technologies.
Okay, good. Andrew Liveris, I could ask you a million different questions, but one of them is, as you travel around the world and split your time between Australia, the Kingdom, and the United States, it seems to be a very old narrative coming out of America that they don't believe that diversification is taking place. We've had this conversation ourselves. So despite all the evidence, women in the workforce, the job creation, the diversification, how does this initiative fit into this idea that, you know, we'll prove that this can be a top 10 economy in the world or not? Do you see that struggle and why people can't believe the Kingdom beyond petroleum?
Yeah, I think it's the greatest story never told, and you know, this initiative is at the epicenter of globalization 2.0. I ran a company, Dow, under globalization 1.0, where the decisions were very simple. World is flat, open supply chains, build at market or build at mill based on feedstock. That conversation meant productivity and lower cost. And then all of a sudden, the world changed on us. The pandemic clearly was a big part, but the digital drivers. And then society insisting on environmental, social, and governance footprints to be measured. That's globalization 2.0, which means what the Kingdom is doing is resetting and using a term that I don't see very much still around the world, which is what does a modern industrial policy look like?
Right.
Now, I've been coming here for a long time, and I've seen now with Vision 2030, you know, led by the excellencies here and obviously not in the room as well, that actually a modern industrial policy is all about globalization 2.0 and actually putting supply chains in place based on competitive advantage and overcoming offshoring and outsourcing with onshoring and resiliency based on human skills, bringing digital skills to the table, and scaling. And therefore, what happens there is actually partnership models, geopolitical companies, and companies. So Lucid, the company I'm now chairing, what are we looking for? We're looking for Plan B. We know Plan A on supply chain, but if you don't have a Plan B, this world is going to interrupt your Plan A. And actually, frankly, that is 101 in business, but we let that go during globalization 1.0. We became over-reliant on these supply chains that would be there forever, and the China mining lithium story is a great example of that. The second thing is actually what is the country doing in terms of its location? The old real estate adage, location, location, location. Finally, NIDLIP and the Ministry of Industry, and led by His Excellency Al-Falih earlier, and now brought to another level, as he said, by His Excellency Bandar Alkhorayef, I've seen now a quality economy being designed. A quality economy means I'm not just moving volume. I'm absolutely upgrading through human skill development. And under Dow, we did Sadara, and I said on a stage like this, that the Saudi workforce is a talent that I rarely see around the world. That the young Saudis are hungry for a quality economy. And here we are, building a story around resiliency to overcome the Plan A, Plan B point. Onshoring and insourcing is one of the drivers at Lucid right now. Why? It costs us a lot if we can't get access to those batteries or can't get access to those critical minerals that supply those batteries. And this cost needs to be factored into the investment decision. So I compare and contrast what's happening in the Kingdom's story and narrative. We all have to go tell it, but it's real and it's delivering a quality manufacturing value-add economy in a great location. East meets west, west meets east, right here.
Good. And Minister Falih, does this fit into the national investment strategy? And I saw in the video and read in my notes here that there's about $13 billion in total in combination to support and incentives on the table. And I sat in a meeting today when somebody says, oh, it's the real deal, the Ministry of Investment, if it's a qualified project and it fits into this equation of resilience and the industrialization diversification strategy, it will have support. Is that vital as a component to bring the global best of breed to the kingdom to help build this?
Well, just, picking off what Andrew is saying of designing the economy and the competitiveness of Saudi Arabia for the future, I think we always go back to sort of our North Star and our roadmap, which is Vision 2030. And today, Vision 2030 is as relevant and as accurate. I mean, we continue to look at it to see if it needs any major update or upgrade, and it doesn't. But of course, the vision has been supported by multiple, over 11 vision realization program. I think the biggest and the most important, certainly most relevant to us today, is NIDLIP, which has, in 2016, mining and minerals, industry, logistics, and energy all integrated under one vision realization program. These 11 vision realization programs have created over 20 strategies, of which many reside in the NIDLIP program, an industrial strategy that was just launched recently, a mining strategy, a logistics strategy, and a special economic zone strategy, which will be announced, the details of which in due course, not long from now. Under these strategies is over 1,000 initiatives, okay? And all of them are interconnected. It's quite complex. That's what His Excellency does. That's why he's the data bank, as you mentioned, and he is the integrator. And one of those initiatives, there are initiatives on regulations. We, under the NIS, the National Industrial Strategy, have 40 initiatives and 4 pillars. The first pillar of the National Investment Strategy is about opportunities. Taking every value chain, Bob talked about some of the minerals. So the aluminum, we take it up to the finished product, from bauxite and Baitha all the way to packaging, or a wheel in a car, or the fuselage of an airplane. And we're developing every component of that value chain. So that's the opportunity. The next one is investors. So we have maybe 10 initiatives that are linking the various classes of investors. So we're working with Lucid, and we're making sure Lucid, of course, is already a combination of a set of investors that have invested at the top and have elected to make it. The third is funding. Lucid has access to SIDF. His Excellency chairs the SIDF. So we want to make sure that both commercial and government developmental soft loans are available, and they're available. We lend for strategic investments through the SIDF up to 75%. Not every project, but selectively 75%. Extended loans with grace periods and very low interest to ensure that they can take off and they have the fuel going forward. And the fourth is regulations and enablers. One of them is special economic zones, but also we make sure that our regulations are always best in class, including very competitive tax regimes. So although the GISRI initiative for resilience of global supply chain is in the first pillar, it really picks off on all of the integrated pillars within the National Investment Strategy, and more importantly, it's linked to all of the strategies under NIDLIP, and even in a softer way with other national strategies, including, for example, the Financial Sector Development Program, which supports us with accessing funds and financing and stability of the fiscal and macro economy of Saudi Arabia.
Okay, very good. I'd like to have the two other ministers address this. How do you develop a competitive advantage to make it imperative for companies to want to use this as their base for manufacturing or mining? How would you take it from your ministry? And I'll have His Excellency Faisal Ibrahim directly right after, because I'm trying to see how it comes together in terms of cost incentives to make sure the companies say, I do need to have a base in the kingdom, not just for geographical reasons that Andrew was saying. That's a huge advantage, but how do I leverage that opportunity?
Well, I think we need to look at competitive advantages in two different kinds of competitive advantages. There are some which are there given by God, just location, natural resources, and I think there was discussion about our geographical location. We've been there for a long time. Now, what are we doing about it? How are we actually getting the gift of God that for our location, our natural resources, how are we actually getting them to be in our favor, getting them to benefit what we're trying to do in diversifying our economy, in bringing quality jobs to our people, and being part of the global community. So I think everybody will always say, okay, Saudi Arabia has been there forever. So what's new? What's new is exactly the regulations we are introducing, hopefully the free zones that are coming up, the infrastructure that we're building, the manpower that we're building, the ability to connect with the global community. Now today, for example, when we discuss FTIs, we're actually considering all of this into account. We're actually looking at every single investor's interest, even if we look at a specific foreign trade agreement. So, and then you have how to actually grow new competitive advantage. And that's the tricky part. And that's really needs a commitment. We need to leverage the God gift. And that's also part of monetizing some of our natural resources, reinvesting the money in our people, in our generation. We have a great program, human development program that inspires for Saudis to be a global player and not just a local player. So investing in our people, investing in technology, investing in the future. What we have done in the RDI ecosystem, where we developed the ecosystem in a way that it's relevant to what we are doing in industry, in all of our sectors, to ensure that the capabilities of RDI is going to be a competitive advantage in the future. So our relationship with the global community. So when we launched, for example, the Future Mineral Forum, it is intended to bring all the interested parties, government, mining companies, financing companies, academia, in one place to discuss the future of mining. How can we all connect with each other? And that's the only way we can see that Saudi Arabia is going to be part of the global community. And we can see it day by day. If you have, I think you visited the Future Mineral Forum and you saw the interest. We are seeing the interest, developing more and more. Countries announcing their UK announced their critical mineral strategy. The US announced their their strategic minerals. So, in my opinion, we have our God gifts where we are milking more and more, leveraging more and more, linking it and building on new competitive advantage for the future.
Good. Faisal, Ibrahim, you want to pick it up from there, but I was thinking in the context of trade, right now there's this rush that you talked about to have that regional resilience and not be over-dependent on globalization. I don't think we're going to reverse back after the gains of the last 30 years. How do you strike the right balance to be tapped into the global demand that's out there, regionally resilient, but to be one of the top 10 economies in the world, because that's the overall goal, is it not?
So I'll try to answer this question and the previous question. I think it's important two, let's say, angles. It's important to understand what the context is today. I think Andrew said globalization 1.0 is a different space. Today, it takes more to become a multinational corporation. So the audience is looking for more solutions. On top of that, in the past, over a period of 10 years, almost, aside from black swan events, every company prices in a drop or a loss because of supply chain issues at around 40% of EBITDA, of a year's EBITDA. Is that going to change because of the complexity that we're going into with the new supply chain challenges? On top of that, supply chains are not simple, literally chains that are sequential. They're complex networks, and each firm has a different philosophy, different approach. I'm pretty sure, as Andrew said, everybody's revisiting what they're doing. So the context is a bit different than the last 30 years or the last 20 years. People want another solution. Back to Saudi and what we're doing, the compelling enablers. On the one hand, you're seeing the talent, as was mentioned. On the other hand, you're seeing the access to energy and what we're doing about it, and the clear determination, the clear signals that we'll continue to play a leadership role in hydrocarbon energy supply, but also the clear signals and signs that we will play a leadership role in renewables. I think that's something that everybody is acknowledging as we speak. On top of that, I think you'd add the layer of not only what needs to be done, but how much the government has done to achieve it. If you ever doubt this transformation, just look at the social reform and the social change. That's how far the government and the people are willing to go to unlock the potential of society and the economy. Look at how much PIF is investing, so skin in the game. Look at the private sector and their activities and how much it's improving, and we still want to see more and working together to see more from the private sector. So again, back to that, look at both angles. I think this initiative helps us get closer to our industrial policy views, get us closer to what we want to make and what we're comfortable buying. And once we understand that, we can understand more clearly how to get more regional economic integration and how to, as a bloc, for example, play a more meaningful role in the global scene. So all of that is partnerships, global partnerships, regional partnerships, is a recipe that is an ingredient in this recipe for success.
Okay, so it's fascinating material here. I think, Bob, you could probably add value by suggesting what is the percentage of localization now. And a lot of people think that in a very antiquated way, you just import talent, they partner, and that's the way it is. But give us the reality check in the mining sector, for example.
Well, you know,
we only have 10 minutes left, so I want to ask everybody to be really direct in our answers.
Sure. So,
thanks.
Right now, our percentage of Saudi employees is 75%. And the story I like to tell is when Andrew and I first met in a snowy mountain resort in Switzerland in 2013, he was bragging about Saudi Arabia's talent whenever I, as an Alcoa executive, was building helping Modern build an enterprise here. Ali Al-Qahtani is now, I've had the opportunity to promote him to be the business unit president for our aluminum business. He's in his late 40s. When he was a young boy, growing up in Jebel, he used to camp at a site called Ras Al Khair. It was a desert. 30 years later, he goes there to help build an aluminum refinery, works there for 12 years. Now he's running a business that's providing aluminum for Lucid. So that's what's possible. 75% of our employees are Saudis. The demographic, these young people are going to see such tremendous change in their lives. They have the ability, we have the resources. There's going to be so many more Ali Al-Qahtanis out there. They're going to be doing such tremendous things in the kingdom. They don't even know what the possibilities are because it hasn't been created yet. So I love telling that story because I think Ali represents so much of what's possible in Saudi Arabia.
Good. Øyvind, you mentioned to me in a conversation we had preparing for the panel that of a country of 5 million, you've got to be very globalized in the world. And I think there's a number of places like that, like a Singapore has to be very globalized, right, because you're a small population. When you look at a population of better than 30 million and its natural resources and this push for diversification, what sort of experience can you see with the other exercises you've done at Aker in different parts of the world, this transformation process? How is it accelerating, how it's working, and the role you have?
Well, I think it's to a large extent about the fact that you need to partner with other companies, but also between public and private sector. And you asked previously the question about the competitive advantage of this kingdom. And I think the alignment between the government and the large business enterprises in the kingdom is unique and is inspiring us to be a part of it and partner with great companies like Aramco. And when we are here on the ground in our joint venture, we also experience that this is not alignment just based on visions or ambitions. It's also a willingness to contribute and engage. So some of our first customers are actually ministries rather than companies. And it shows you that the willingness to be a part of the development, a part of the change, and to build up proper businesses with global potential.
Good. Andrew, it's interesting that Ian Bremmer wrote a book a couple years ago, The Political Strategist, about a G0 world where there's no leadership, right? We've had this debate at the World Economic Forum, which we were in discussions about. When you don't have a US and China getting along, and you don't have a compass, if you will, with that sort of balance in the world, how does Saudi Arabia define its own pathways, where it defines its new role, where we're not clear where US-China relations, which kind of built that global supply chain, ends up today? And can it find the balance between East and West straddling here in the Middle East?
It's been mentioned more than once that the global multinationals and the geopolitical order have changed forever. The 21st century is redefining alliance structures of all sorts, which means there's a vacuum created. The G0 concept is a vacuum. And so who steps into that vacuum? I think, my very personal view, we're in about 10 more years of disruption, which is coincident with 8 or more so years of Vision 2030. The opportunity from the weakness that's evident around the world right now is that we give birth here in this country to new leadership models that actually speak to partnerships, like the Norway example, which is magnificent, the Singapore example. Size doesn't matter. It's really the quality of your intellect and your talent that will differentiate this century more than ever. And I think that opportunity is presented. And I wanted to make two small points, because the devil's in the detail, and the Lucid example is perfect. Look, you've got to build the small mediums to go along with this. Because one of the things that big companies do, we're all small once, okay? Aramco was small once. But to build the supply chains with the transparency required, you know, whether it's modern slavery issues, whether it's scope 3 emissions, there's a new type of tier 2, tier 3 that needs to be built. That has to be built here simultaneously. That wasn't the case before. Second is the role of R&D and the entrepreneur. On this stage, I heard fintech yesterday. Deep tech and entrepreneurs in the innovation ecosystem, Gen 1 product is not going to cut it. Electrification is the future, but the energy density of electrification is terrible. Okay, let's call a spade a spade. Hydrogen is 30% density of carbon fuels. So you've got to put money into R&D and build the innovation ecosystem and the entrepreneurs to give them the opportunity. That industrial strategy is what this kingdom is working on. So I think the vacuum can be filled by a country like Saudi Arabia. It has a top-down strategy that's working. Talented ministers, don't want to embarrass them, that get business. And suddenly, the story and the narrative, if you build it, they will come. People are coming.
Okay, very good. We have just 5 minutes left. So I just want to open the floor to this distinguished panel to say, you know, what did we leave out of the conversation? One of the things comes to mind when I've had a chance to sit with all three of you is that this is a hell of a stretch target. I mean, every time I come here, every 6 to 8 weeks, there's a new program on the table. It's like, how much bandwidth does this country have? I mean, how much capacity can it manage right now? Is that beyond the bandwidth of the country, or how do you convince investors that are sitting in the audience and say, yeah, we can handle it, we know what he's doing, the boss has given directions and we're following? What can you add to that, Mr. Falih?
Well, first of all, I think it's a combination of leadership, vision, and a broad strategy, and then leaving the space for best and brightest to find their way within those parameters, broad pathways going forwards. And the partners are international as well as domestic, and the international investors can come and work alone if they choose to, or can partner with national champions or whoever they wish. And we heard from Øyvind about partnering with Aramco. But it doesn't have to be Aramco or the PIF. It could be a private Saudi company that are available. So the kingdom, I would just going back to the last question. The kingdom not only has the vision, not only has the leadership exhibited by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince that has been manifesting itself on multiple dimensions over the last 6 years, but have the stability of the policy. If you bring it down to the micro level and going back to the nuts and bolts of what we're talking about, our competitive advantages are stabilized. His Excellency can offer lands that are some of the lowest cost on the planet, but also some of the most advanced. Same thing with our digital infrastructure, energy. Our electricity prices today are a fraction of where they are, not only in Europe, but elsewhere, and they're stabilized. If you come and invest in a major investments, we will stabilize your electricity, your gas price.
Now that's a big issue right now.
That is a big issue, but it's always been that way. I mean, by the way, we are part of global supply chain. Oil has been the lifeblood of globalization 1.0, and we provided it in a very stable way. Petrochemicals that we built in the 70s and 80s have been an ingredient of global supply chains, and the gas prices that were offered to them at 50 cents back in the 70s stayed at 50 cents when global prices were multiplying. And Andrew knows this from his experience within Dow. So today, for this much more complex, much more knowledge and IP and talent integrated and multiple materials integrated, we're going to provide the same ingredients: stable, visionary policy, stable prices and natural resources, and certainly energy as well as land and the location. You put it all together, I end with what I started with. The kingdom is unbeatable today on this global supply chain resiliency imperative that every multinational company is looking for.
Good. I have a new mantra. I'm going to go walk the halls here, and then when I go back to London, the gistry. They go, what the heck is this guy talking about? And that'll give me a chance to open up and lay it out, right? And we like consistency. I tell you, living in the UK, in the last couple of months, has been anything but consistent, right? So that's been kind of a roller coaster living back in Europe and that component. We could go on for another 15, 20 minutes very easily, but I know there's a signing ceremony. And I'm glad we will conclude with your final comments, which are very solid. I apologize we couldn't go 3 or 4 rounds, but what an excellent discussion. Can we give a nice round of applause and thanks for putting this together? Thank you very much.